To genuinely hold space for anyone, whether it's a child, our beloved, a friend, someone that we've met, or in a whole room of people that we're facilitating space for, is going to require a true humility, a true groundedness in ourselves, and the capacity to have what the yoga tradition calls non-judgmental awareness and spaciousness of mind. Because what often happens in holding space is that if someone is going through a tough moment, like just a tough moment in their hearts, mentally, in a pose, with their own self-doubt, in order to hold space effectively, we have to get out of our own way. And we also have to be able to recognize our own triggers and to know our own shadow and to know our own triggers quite quickly. Otherwise, something happens in the room or in relationship and the person begins to express it, but because it hits our own triggers, our own insecurity, whatever it might be, we take it personal and it hits our wounds and traumas, then we're in kind of like a weakened, ungrounded place, while the friend is also experiencing something that they need. They're moving through their own transformation, and we're no longer holding that space. So non-judgmental awareness is key, like the capacity to, this is where all of our practices as yogis and yoginis come into action. When something actually, rises in a tough way. We have to stay grounded. That's why the grounding cord is important. We have to stay connected with our own breath. We have to stay connected with the power to trust in the bigger alchemy and transformation of what's happening in someone's life. And we have to know our own shadow and know our own triggers and know our own buttons. So let's give like a few different examples. And there's different spectrums and stages of all of this. Let's go to like a child. Now, let's say that, so that we can just bring it into our lives and understand. A child, let's say there's a young child who is just completely afraid in a given moment that you are going to abandon them. You might be at a shopping mall, at a restaurant, whatever, and their fear comes up of like, what if I'm left behind? And so we all have probably seen this happen, and the child is just freaking out. And you know that you're totally there for them, that there's no chance that you're gonna leave. And yet this child just feels like, what if I'm left behind? It's a fear that they have, a fear in their own, growing up and whatever's going on for them. What that child needs in that moment is just a massive big squeeze and a big hug. Like, I'm here. I'm right here. I've got you. I love you. I'm not going anywhere. This is kind of the same thing as holding space, except you're doing like a big, massive energetic hug around that room. And you're holding it. And through that, you convey, I'm here. We're holding this space, not going anywhere. Now, if in the child example, if one of your triggers or wounds is that I'm not a good enough parent, or I'm feeling like insecure in myself in this moment. What if I'm not doing it right? Whatever it might be, that story. And then that child's expressing, but I don't want you to leave me, and what if you leave me? But then it hits your own trigger and insecurity without you being really clear about what your trigger is and your own story and being really grounded in that moment. Then it's gonna hit, pain is gonna hit pain. And so it collides and creates more pain. So what has to happen in the holding of space is that we've just gotta stay steady. Get out of our own way, be able to bear witness. There's total empathy. It's not a rigid barrier of a wall, like I don't feel your pain. just total presence with whatever rises and falls. This, if we only talked about this, this would be everything. Because what can happen, especially as we're teaching or we have facilitated space with lots of people, one thing that happens is maybe there's a pedestal kind of relationship where the teacher has a pedestal relationship with the rest, and that creates a certain dynamic. Or the teacher might have a really like an attachment to their agenda and an attachment to needing to be affirmed in their teaching through the praise of the students, because they haven't totally owned, you know, their own full self. And so it's like feeding off of the confirmation of the student. So if that kind of stuff is going on, it's going to be trickier, because the teacher's kind of looking and feeding off of a confirmation from the student. So if something happens and rises that is a tougher challenge, then it can hit the teacher and their own triggers, and they become more insecure in that moment and then stop holding the space. So what to do? Get grounded, be with the breath, open up the spaciousness of the mind, and don't judge it. Don't judge the person, don't judge yourself. Just hold that ground and call in the allies and the protectors, your own connection. This is why a teacher's, their own practice, their own daily sadhana is going to be so weighty and profound, because you're anchored inside whatever can rise and fall. And I'm going to speak to this in probably the third point, but to also be aware that there's something that's called a drama triangle, which has a rescuer, a victim, and a perpetrator. And what can often happen in the role of a teacher-student is that the teacher becomes the rescuer to the student's victimhood. Now, if that kind of thing starts to happen, again, highlight it, become aware without judgment, and just say, oh, I see it. I see myself trying, you know, to rescue the student. And then what happens, if there's always a rescuer and a victim, then there's always going to be a certain kind of disempowerment, because the victim can't come into their empowered truth. So we have to be so aware to genuinely hold space. I think of, let me just give you another example. Like, let's say you're in a relationship with someone. It could be a business partner, a lover, a friend. And this friend is working with their own prosperity, but they are also confronting so much of their fears around money. And so they begin to tell you, okay, all their fears around money, and that maybe they're afraid they don't have enough, and you have to hold the space to really listen with presence. But if you hold that space, but then take in their fears and it hits your own fears around money, again, you're going to have fear hitting fear, and it collides and creates more fear. So what do we have to do? We have to, what is called, one of my shadow work teachers, Robert Augustus Masters, calls the empathic membrane. We have to hold the space, stay open to whatever feeling is present, whatever pain there might be, without running away. Hold that space, stay grounded, stay rooted, stay connected with your breath, and then open up the spaciousness, non-judgment. The empathy is there, but you don't let the other person's pain or fear hit your own triggers of pain and fear. And if they do, you bear witness to it, but you don't react from it, you relate to it. This is a really key thing, because if we start reacting from the triggers of the pain and the fear and whatever else it might be, it's going to create a lot more turbulence. If we're able to observe, to hold, to become more intimate, to turn towards, then and relate to it, now transformation can happen. So what I want to say with this first one is, holding space will require your deepest embodied practice as a yogi, as a yogini.